Are you ready to think big and act bold? Then you are in the right place. This is Innovative Entrepreneurs, a podcast that will bring you the stories, insights, and tips from some of the most successful and innovative entrepreneurs in the world. I am your host, Erica Bailey, and I am here to help you start, scale, and sustain your own entrepreneurial journey. Let's get started.
Today we have a very special guest, the remarkable Minette Norman. Minette is an author, speaker, and consultant who spent decades leading global teams in the software industry. Her belief in the power of diversity to accelerate innovation is reflected in her impactful works, including The Boldly Inclusive Leader and her co-authorship, The Psychological Safety Playbook. That sounds pretty cool. I think I'm going to have to get that one. With a wealth of experience, including her role as former vice president of an engineering practice at Autodesk, Minette has been a prominent advocate for inclusive leadership, psychological safety, and empathy, making her a sought-after keynote speaker on these critical topics. Her academic background includes a degree in drama and French from the Tufts University and further studies in Paris, highlighting her rich and diverse perspective. Minette, I am so grateful to have you on my podcast. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me, Erica.
Oh, it's going to be fun. All right. You obviously have a very diverse background, having studied drama and French in college and then working in the tech industry for over 20 years. So how did you make this transition and what skills do you think you learned along the way?
Yeah, the way I made the transition was kind of interesting. So I actually spent 30 years in the tech industry, which is ancient history, right? And how I got into tech was I was living in New York after college and I was working for the French Trade Commission. I was using not my drama degree, but my French degree at the time. And it was at the time when they were introducing computers. And I found that I was a quick study. And what I was especially good at was helping people learn the software and the technology when they were kind of intimidated by it. Okay. And it was that skill that actually brought me into Silicon Valley and to tech. I moved back to California in 1988. I'd grown up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Okay. And I got a job in 1989 at Adobe, and I was hired as a technical writer, and it was when they were developing version 1.0 of Photoshop. And my first job at the company was to write the tutorial for version 1.0 of Photoshop. So that came out in 1990. So it gives you a sense of like a really long period ago in Silicon Valley history. And then I spent the next 30 years, about 10 years as an individual contributor and about 20 years in management and leadership roles.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. This is great to be in your presence, to know that you were part of like that whole launch of this, version 1.0. You have written 2 books on how to create inclusive and high-performing teams. It's The Boldly Inclusive Leader and The Psychology Safety Playbook. So can you talk to me a little bit about these books and kind of what inspired you to create them, or maybe some tips about what's in them?
Yeah, so the book, The Boldly Inclusive Leader, is my book and my book alone that I just came out in August. And I was really working on it for many years. And in the sort of interim period, while I was thinking about it, I had an outline. I hadn't finished much of it. I met my co-author on the Psychological Safety Playbook. So Caroline Helbig and I met in an online class in 2021. And we just hit it off, and we were talking about, the class was actually about running psychological safety assessments. And we both came to the conclusion that there's very little practical information for managers and leaders who want to create the environment where everyone can speak up and, challenge if they disagree. There was a lot of academic writing about it, but nothing practical. And so the two of us took this little detour together to write the Psychological Safety Playbook. So I had these 2 books come out. The first one with Carolyn came out in February 2023, and The Boldly Inclusive Leader came out in August 2023. So it's a little bit nuts to have 2 books come out the same year, but that's how it came to be. And why I care so much about these topics really came from my decades in Silicon Valley, where I found it was quite rare. Actually, it was more the exception than the rule to have very inclusive environments where everyone felt they belonged. And more often than not, there was sort of this, what I would describe as the insiders club and everyone else. And you're nodding your head because you recognize it. We all have been through this. Yeah. Yeah. It's so common that there's the inner circle. And it's often the inner circle are the people that most resemble or most connect with the senior leader. Okay. And the senior leader tends to hire people more like them than not. Mm-hmm. And that's why we don't have diverse teams, especially at the C-level. Okay. It's why we often get into really homogeneous teams. And so I realized this is a problem. We certainly have been talking a lot about diversity, equity, inclusion, but we don't necessarily do the work required to create an inclusive culture. Okay. And by that, I mean where everyone feels heard and seen and respected and where their voices are welcomed. And so that's why both books came to be. And I think it's super important. And it really relates to you kind of honed in on empathy right away. Mm-hmm. So empathy turns out to be one of the most critical leadership skills that has been very much undervalued for forever. I think it was last year that Forbes came out with an article that said empathy is the most important leadership skill, but it's hugely undervalued. And here's one of the things that I learned about. I didn't know this, but we have empathy more easily for the people that we just naturally connect with. Like, you have that moment where you click with someone, and then you empathize with them because you think they are like you. But we actually really struggle. Yeah, we struggle as human beings to have empathy for the people who are different. And look at it in politics, look at it in the world, and then look at it in the workplace. The people that maybe rub you the wrong way or are always challenging your ideas in a meeting. Those are the people where we really need to practice seeing them as more like us than unlike us and really getting out of those us and them dynamics in the workplace.
Wow. I mean, how do you think upper management even starts changing that mindset? I mean, coming from, I started right out of college. I worked at a law firm, and it was a, male-run law firm, and it was tough. You know what I mean? They gave tough love. It was, hard work, and rarely did I ever feel like I was recognized, seen, heard. You know what I mean? And then sad thing is that I just had a baby, and all I wanted to do was move up. I'd been there for 3 years. All I wanted to do was move up. So I go and I talk to the head honcho, and he tells me, no, you can't because you have a young baby at home and you need to be there. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to put the words on here, but I went home, applied for my master's degree, and never went back. Yeah. Because I felt so unheard. I mean, I would have worked there forever. I loved it. The people were great, but those moments where I felt like, okay, these people don't respect me. They don't see me. I'm young. I'm different. And I wasn't part of the hip crowd because I wasn't there for long. Everybody had been there for a while, and it's just like an outsider. And the only person I wasn't an outsider to was the attorney that I was a paralegal for. But he needed me, so he was never going to treat me like an outsider. So I hear that. I mean, based off of that, what do you think changes somebody or gives the C-level execs to have the mindset to start changing that view and start living on empathy, not just in the workplace, but personally? Because I think you need to do it both places, right? In order,
sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you think C-levels actually develop that mindset of empathy or kindness, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think there has to be at least a willingness to learn and recognize that they don't have all the answers. And I really think that is foundational. Okay. And assuming there is at least somewhat of a growth mindset that I have something to learn. Often I think that C-level executives respond to data. And there's great data out there. One of the places that I would start and that I look at every year, because they've done 8 years of reporting on this, there is Business Solver. The organization Business Solver puts out a report every year called the State of Workplace Empathy.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've ever heard of it. You can download it. It's free.
Okay.
And it's fascinating because what it shows the findings are slightly different year to year, but what it keeps finding is that employees at all levels really want to work for an empathetic organization with empathetic leadership. They care deeply about this. And they're seeing a very big divide between what they would like to experience at work and what their C-level executives are offering. And the latest report is quite interesting because the 2023 report that came out this spring shows that employees very much want this empathetic leadership, and C-level staff, especially CEOs, think they've already done that. They are as empathetic as can be. And so there's this complete gap between expectations and the C-staff. So I would share that report with every CEO and every C-level executive. And the other thing that's very interesting in this year's report is that there's this huge gap, this huge divide, and stuck in the middle is human resources.
Yeah.
And they're trying to navigate discontented, unseen and unheard employees and C-level executives who think it's all good. And how do we close this gap? So I would start with the data there and say, let's look at this. Let's dive into it. What can we learn from this? And what might we do differently?
I love that. You're turning the empathetic emotions and feelings into data so that they understand, right? I mean, that's what I'm hearing, right? So they see, okay, maybe I do have something to learn about this, or the numbers mean something, right? Like it makes sense. All right, let's try it, right? Because the numbers mean something.
Yeah. And I like to, I of course know that there are certain audiences, for example, C-level execs, engineers that I work with a lot who really want the data. And you often need to provide the data if they're even going to listen to you.
Okay.
And I will also tell you that data alone does not often change people's minds. And the combination, data can be convincing, but to change behavior and beliefs, you often need more than data. And that's where we really need human connection and stories, because it's often, and I've seen this with C-level staff, they suddenly hear about one of their employees' experiences, for example, in being excluded, in being discriminated against, in being shut down in a meeting and not heard, and having their voice, really being silenced. And it's only when they hear these true real world stories that they can connect the data point to what people are experiencing. And so I really believe you can't just sit in your ivory tower at any level of leadership and read the reports. You have to listen to people. You have to go out and meet them. You have to meet the people you don't normally connect with. And you need to learn what they're experiencing day to day in your working environment.
I think it all starts with kindness. That makes sense. Typically, I see it like black or white, right? That's just how my mind works. But it's like you're weaving in color into that mindset, So I love what you're saying here, but I did not realize it's not just data. It's data and understanding your team. It's data and understanding empathy. It's data and getting to know the janitors and the execs underneath you. It's understanding your core team, the people that keep your business running and what they need. And they need kindness. They need empathy, especially in today's day and age, because I don't think people will put up with anything less as we continue to grow in these years, especially the ones that are going into businesses right now, right? They're like, okay, I can go make this much money at home playing Xbox. That I don't need this. You know what I mean? I think businesses are really going to hurt if they don't start building that type of mindset, because people aren't going to want to work like that anymore, especially when you can make so much money on YouTube or Xbox. I know that's silly, but people are making a lot of money. These kids, teens, young adults are making a lot of money on very simple things. And so if they're going to go and work under corporate overlords, you got to not be an overlord, right? You got to understand your people. So, that's kind of what I'm hearing. Would you say I'm saying?
Yeah. It's all about the people. It's all about connecting human to human. It's not putting yourself on a pedestal, but recognizing that everyone has something to contribute, and that if you really want to tap into the full power of your workforce, if you want to really bring out all the gifts and all the talents and all the innovation, then you need to create a culture where people feel they can speak up. They can be themselves. And as long as you are stifling that and you have this sort of insiders club and everyone else, then the people who feel that they're not part of that inside group, they're going to stay silent, and you might as well not have hired them because you're not tapping into their full potential. And they're going to leave eventually because they're not feeling that they are living up to their gifts and their potential, and they're not able to do their best work. And wouldn't any leader want everyone in their organization to be working to their fullest potential? I would think so.
Absolutely. Imagine what could get done, especially people who are enthusiastic about what they're doing, who are buying into your business just as much as you would, right? As an owner, C-level exec, founder. And I'm thinking this can go beyond just obviously large scale companies. It really needs to be implemented in life, right? With your children, we have to start listening, right? Stop talking so much. It's hard for me to do, but stop talking so much and start listening, right? Start understanding who they are. And I think too often we are trying to make them who we want them to be instead of who they are supposed to be. So to me, it feels like if you can start this in your family or your group of friends, it really will move on into business because it's just who you're becoming, right? Now you have this mindset of, all right, people deserve to be heard, whether it's a child or whether it's your partner. So I love this. I really do love this. I got my master's in organizational behavior, and all I wanted to do was create healthy workplaces.
Yeah.
It has been 15 years later, and I'm still obsessed with how this can just change. This just mindset could change so much around the world. I mean, I believe it. I truly, in my heart, believe it. Now, after I left the law firm, I was no longer in a male-dominated world, right? I was really just working just a small handful of people. But you've been a leader in a male-dominated tech industry, leading 3,500 software professionals at Autodesk. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. I mean, I had about 1,000 on my org chart, but I had to influence 3,500. So that is true. And it was a very male dominated environment for sure.
So talk to me about the challenges, how did you overcome those challenges, or, what challenges did you face when you were working in this? I'm assuming some of these execs didn't have the same mindset you did. So how did that work?
Well, I'm going to go back to when I first got that job, because it was pretty interesting. When I was already within the company, I was already a senior director running a pretty big team. I had about 100 on my staff. And then this position opened up to lead engineering. And I had been reporting to the head of engineering. So when he told me he was leaving that job, I decided I'm going to apply for it. And when I applied for it, it was really interesting because the senior exec, he was on the C staff, who was hiring for the role, said, Minette, I know your reputation. I know you're a really good leader, but you have some strikes against you. And one of them is that it's a boys' club. Oh. And he admitted it. And I actually was grateful to him. He was a good guy. I will say.
Right.
He was honest. He was open. And he said, look, all of the engineering leaders in the company are men. And that was true. It's it's somewhat changed since then, but back then. And he said, and I want to see if you can get traction and you can break into the boys' club, essentially. And also because you were not an engineer yourself. I mean, you've been in tech a long time. You have certain tech expertise, but you are not an engineer yourself. So can you break into this club? And he gave me basically, instead of offering me the job outright, he gave me a 90-day trial.
Okay.
And so I had 90 days to meet all the senior male leaders in engineering and really talk to them. And I will tell you, Erica, I was upfront with all of them. Okay. And I said, look, there are concerns that I can't do this job. One, because I'm not an engineer and I'm sort of an outsider. And how do you feel about that? And I think by leading with my own honesty and vulnerability, people were really open, and it was so interesting. I didn't get pushback. I thought I was going to get lots of resistance, and instead people said, we actually need someone who thinks differently. We don't need another. We've had 3 white male engineers leading engineering, and they have not been able to really transform things the way the company needs them transformed. We need someone who thinks differently. We think with your leadership skills, your communication skills, and the fact that you are not an engineer, you actually might be the right person. And I did get the job. So that was really interesting and refreshing. It was I would say it was a hard 3 months. It was kind of hard to just like go through every time I feel like, oh, I've got to prove myself again. But I led with honesty and openness and, a willingness to not be accepted.
Yeah.
I think that helped. And then, but doing the job was another thing. So I was in the role for 5 years, and a lot of it was changing our tools and technology. And there's always resistance to that. But gradually we got people to come along. But what I started realizing pretty early on in that job was tools and technology. Those are one of the problems we're dealing with, or two of the problems. The bigger problem is actually that we don't have a collaborative culture in engineering. We have a siloed culture. And it was basically a company that had grown through acquisition. And every time we acquired a company, that company was kind of left alone to have their own culture, do their own thing. Mm-hmm. And suddenly we were really trying to get everyone to work together and have software that looked like it came from one company and felt like it came from one company. And that really meant that we were going to have to get people to work together in different ways. And that's when I started getting very interested in listening and collaboration and empathy and psychological safety and all the things I had never learned in all the years in leadership. I mean, I'd certainly taken management classes, but really we didn't go deep into human behavior and what it really takes to change things. And so that's where I started focusing. And I get pushback. I got not so much pushback as just like, are we ready to go this fast? Like, people would kind of question, are we really going to do this? Are we really going to share code and work across silos? And eventually, people started to change. It was very slow change, but I didn't get shut down and I didn't get ridiculed for bringing up topics like empathy and collaboration. But ultimately, when I will tell you that the reason I left, I was in that job for 5 years, and my executive sponsor who hired me in that role left the company. And when he left, everything changed. And they weren't so open to me. And they weren't so open to me challenging the status quo. And I was forced out of that job in 2019.
Out of 5 years of proving yourself? Okay, well,
it happens. I'm not alone. Unfortunately, I'm not alone with these stories. You know that.
I heard on another podcast, though, this woman said that rejection is God's protection. So no matter what you believe in, obviously that rejection led you to where you are today. Right.
Completely.
So of course, back then it's like, I don't understand, you don't know why. What's the why? But I'm assuming you probably know what that why is now.
Well, it's so true. In the time it was really, really hard and quite devastating because I'd had such a long career and I felt like I felt like I was at the top of my game and sort of at the apex of my career, and then have it all come crashing down. But being forced out made me think about what's important and what I was not ready to retire, although lots of people thought I would. Like, no, I have learned a lot. I have lots of energy. I don't want to stop working. Why should I stop working? But it became clear to me also, this was the crystal clarity I got, that I don't want to go work for another boss. And that's why I had to start my own thing, because I was unwilling after all those years to go work for someone that, maybe wasn't aligned with my values.
And that's the thing is ultimately you do have to align with each other's values. There has to be a synchronicity. Like with me, my clients, I'm very picky about who I work with and who I do, jobs for, mainly because I want to see success for my clients. And if there is not a good feeling, if there is not a connection between me and the client, there is going to be tension the whole way through. Right. And projects take longer and, people leave unhappy. And so that's why I think it's very important, no matter what you do, that you have some sort of connection with those that you are around, whether it's, your tribe, your people, your customers, your family. It's so important. And obviously it helps you grow. It gets you where you wanted to be. I could talk to you forever. So you moved into your own business. So tell me about that.
Right. So it was funny timing because I left my company in August of 2019, and I spent about 6 months trying to figure out what was what and what I wanted to do. And I decided, okay, I know I'm going to start Minette Norman Consulting LLC in the spring of 2020, which was, of course, when the world was shutting down because of the pandemic. Right. So my timing was impeccable in some ways. But actually, that was also a gift. And the gift was that it gave, because no one had budget at that time. Everyone's budgets were completely shut down. I'm like, I'd love to hire you, but we have no discretionary funding. So it gave me sort of a few months in really from spring to fall of 2020, when we were all shut down, to figure out like, what exactly is my focus? What am I going to offer? And I had time to really to meet with other consultants and take some classes and figure out what I wanted to do. And I got clear that my focus is inclusive leadership. And I'm not broadly focused on DEI. I am focused on how do we as leaders create an inclusive environment. And that must be on a foundation of psychological safety. So I developed workshops. And by the fall of that year, I had my first client. So it wasn't such a disaster to launch in 2020. And then 2021 was actually quite a big year. And my business is mostly referral based. And, a lot of people in Silicon Valley know me. So my first clients were all tech clients. And it's kind of grown. And then I actually slowed down my business, strangely enough. But in early 2022, I'm now losing track of the years, 2022, I took 6 months out to really finish the Boldly Inclusive Leader. So I had to slow down, and you know how it is with, I'm a solopreneur, so I could only do so much. So I was doing a lot of writing. And then now in some ways, my business is being rebuilt in an interesting way, in that it's not only tech companies. So initially, as I said, all of my clients were tech companies, mostly Silicon Valley. But now what I'm finding is that other industries are recognizing the need for psychological safety and inclusion. And I'm being asked to come into universities and county government and school districts. And just as you said, all of this I had really thought about this from the lens of working in a tech company, because that's what I knew. But the lessons of my book, or books, both books really, people have been telling me these are applicable everywhere in our lives as human beings. And so I'm kind of not surprised, but it was initially surprising to have clients coming from really different industries than I had expected.
Because it's not the norm, right?
Right.
Everybody can use this. Okay, so
everyone craves it. Yes.
Everyone craves it. I mean, absolutely. So can you explain to me what psychological safety means?
Oh, yes. Sorry, we didn't do that.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think I'm tracking with you, but there might be others who don't. So I probably didn't even ask until now. So what is psychological safety?
Psychological safety is the belief that when you're in a group, a specific group, you are okay with asking a question. You are okay with even making a mistake or challenging the dominant beliefs in the group, disagreeing, knowing that you will not be excluded or marginalized or embarrassed for doing any of those things. So it's the environment where you can really not filter yourself except to be respectful. Like, of course, it doesn't mean you're not respectful, but it means that you can say, Erica, I'm seeing things differently, and I'd like to share my point of view. And in that environment, you, Erica, would not say, Minette, I don't want to hear it. You would say, I'm very interested in hearing it, and let's hear all the points of view. And what psychological safety has been proven to do is result in better business results because everyone is fully contributing, and also higher innovation because the people who may have those wild ideas feel willing to share them.
Yeah.
As opposed to many environments where you're sitting back and going, I don't think they really want to hear it. I think I'm going to be humiliated if I say this. And so we stay silent. And there's so much, honestly, I lived it and breathed it. There's so much silence in meetings, for example, where two people do all the talking and the other people are sitting back silently. And those other people have things to say and they have great ideas, but it's not a particularly safe environment for them to share them.
Wow. Okay. So communication is a big part of this, and learning how to communicate and learning how to listen and then show that, okay, I hear you. I want, I'm interested in what you have to say, instead of just like, okay, what is your idea? right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, they might want to hear my idea, but are they, do they really think that I'm worthy? What are they going to laugh at me? I have this thing that I've been drawing and thinking about that I've been putting on a napkin and holding in my bag because I really want to share this. I think that it's special, but I don't think that anybody will, I think I'll get laughed out of the conference room. Like, that's what I'm seeing. And
yes,
that unsafety, feeling unsafe. This is cool.
Yeah. And one thing that happens, honestly, a lot, I've been the victim of it. I'm sure I've done it.
Okay.
And it's especially like, think of this scenario. You're a senior executive, you're holding an all hands meeting.
Okay.
You've got hundreds of people in the room, you've got thousands of people on Zoom, whatever.
Okay.
And someone asks you a challenging question. And you, because you just got defensive and you're in front of everybody and you don't take a moment to think and pause, you lash out at that person. And you say, that's a ridiculous idea, or that's a ridiculous question. I'm not even going to give it the time of day. And I've seen it happen. And what happens then is you have just signaled to your entire community that, don't ask so-and-so the challenging questions, because they don't want to hear it. And this is not a safe environment. But what I've seen can be so effective by contrast, and this is how you do, one of the ways you create psychological safety is same scenario. You are the senior exec. Someone just asks you a really challenging question, and you take one moment, you take a breath, you take a sip of your water, and you say, wow, thanks for that. I actually hadn't thought of that, or I don't have a great answer. Can I get back to you? Yes. I need some time to think about this. Or is there anyone in the room who can answer that question? We're tapping in again to your collective genius in the room. But you, as the leader, do not have to have that immediate answer, but do not shut down the conversation. That's what creating psychological safety is.
Okay. It sounds so simple. It sounds so simple, but yet it is so complicated to just get that mindset, right? But
it is simple. And I always like to say simple does not mean easy, right?
Yeah.
Like simple in concept, but practice is hard and messy, and we're messy. And part of why it's not natural to us is that, and you may know this already, your listeners may know this, but I like to share it just as a reminder, is when we get defensive like that, like when that CEO or C-level executive is up there and gets challenged, our brains, anyone, it's just being human, our brains go into that defensive fight, flight, freeze mode. And we do not have our higher reasoning available to us then, because we are in survival mode. And we have to actually be aware of it, recognize it, and then take that pause, which can calm down that reaction and give us back our higher reasoning. So we do have to get that self-awareness. That's the hard piece. The self-awareness that I'm getting defensive, my face is bright red, my heart is beating so fast, and I need to just take a pause and do not respond. That is such a simple, but not easy thing to remember as a leader, but really important, really important.
So, I don't have, 1,000 employees or, but I can actually relate this to a conversation I just had with my husband / business partner / better half. And we had a disagreement, right? But it was like one quick snap and all of a sudden I am like defensive. I didn't even take a minute to breathe. I'm chilling. I'm like, tears are coming down my face, and it's all something so stupid. And I really was the one at fault here because I got defensive and I wasn't listening. I didn't take a moment to listen to what he was saying. I just heard the first jab, which really wasn't a jab. And then all of a sudden, And it's hard because we've been together for 20 years. We've been working together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 15 years. And so there's times when it's just like full blown explosion, but it does no good. By the end of the day, I'm freaking tired. All I want to do is go to sleep. I'm angry. I'm angry at him. I'm angry at myself. And I've got nothing done. Absolutely nothing done. So I can relate in a smaller sense, but that moment where you have to take that moment to breathe.
Yeah.
You don't, man. You're going to go all girl, all me, right? I mean, it's literally volcano. But like you said, you don't want everybody to see that, right? Well, I don't want my kids to see that.
Right.
And it's like, I blew up and I'm like all upset, my tears. And my 15-year-old son comes walking up the stairs and he's looking at me. He's like, Mom, are you okay? And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? It was like, okay. So that's when I took the breath.
Yeah.
Way longer. I mean, it happened
after the fact. Yeah. And it often does, unfortunately. And so, one of the things that I say to the people I work with, and I say it in my book, is like, we're not going to get this right 100% of the time. We are human. And so when we have a reaction that we wish we hadn't had, when we didn't take that pause, or when we used language, for example, that we thought was okay, but isn't as inclusive as it should be, we can apologize. And that's the key, is like, we are human. We're not going to get it perfectly every time. And so, but genuinely apologize when you've done damage, and when you have shut someone down or made them feel bad and made them feel marginalized, or any of the things that we do is make it a genuine apology and repair that damage. Yeah.
That's the key word there. Genuine.
Yeah. Genuine. Not a fake one. Not my HR person told me I had to do it, but right. Yeah. From my heart, I feel bad that I did this.
There you go. So what advice do you have for companies and leaders who are looking to cultivate inclusive cultures in their high performing teams, like particularly industries where diversity and empathy are crucial for their success? I mean, obviously they need to read your books. I mean, and the links to the books are going to be in the show notes, people. So
fabulous.
Whether you are a, exec, or whether you are a mom, right? This stuff does make sense. So I'm going to get them for sure. So I suggest other people take a read on it. But Great. What would be your tips? So
one of the places I think is an easy place to start is, how do you run your meetings? Now, this isn't where I start either of my books, but this is in both of my books, because I think meetings are an embodiment often of the culture in which you're working. Okay. And what you see in meetings, if you do nothing else, if you just observe how meetings are run, is you see who has the power. Like, who does most of the speaking? Who gets listened to? Start with just observing that.
Okay.
And then you need to start to change that dynamic, because I will guarantee you, by default, what usually happens is meetings are not inclusive and we don't hear all the voices. Mm-hmm. And so how are we going to run meetings and maybe make some agreements? You as the leader don't have to come up with the rules of engagement, but make some agreements. Are we going to have someone facilitate? Are we going to take turns facilitating? How do we take turns speaking? How do we hear from everybody? How do we ensure that no one's dominating the airtime? Some things like this are very tactical. Mm-hmm. But they can make a big difference into who feels heard and who feels included versus who is just left out of the equation. So that's a great starting place. You start with your meetings.
I'll start with observing.
Just see the dynamics.
Yeah, see it, as a whole. Take yourself away from it for a minute, right?
Yeah.
Observe the whole situation and then digest it. That's awesome.
I'll give one more tip because I think that's sort of the group behavior, right? Group behavior is really important. And I think the other place is that leaders need to start with themselves and their own behavior and their own self-awareness. So as you said, how am I listening? Am I actually listening, or am I just preparing my response?
Oh, yes.
Right? And so starting with showing up as a really good, curious listener. I want to understand this person. I'm not going to advocate from my point of view until I've fully heard them. And I'm going to really try not to get defensive when I'm challenged. Starting with that, combined with how we run meetings, can really drive dramatic change in a culture. So there's lots more. And one of the things that I do put in the Boldly Inclusive Leader that I hope is helpful is I end each chapter with daily and weekly practices, because I believe that becoming a better leader is an ongoing journey. It's not a flip of a switch. Mm-hmm. And so I offer ideas of things you can do every day, every week to really change things for yourself and your team.
So you're giving actual action items, so that it's not just, I'm reading your book, okay, I'm putting it away, but it's like, okay, I'm going to train myself. I'm actually listening to this, and I'm going to work on myself so that I become a better leader and bring this to my company culture.
That's it.
That's it.
That's my goal. That is my goal. And I want to have a big impact. I mean, that's my big goal, because I think workplaces need this so much.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Especially with how much we're growing. You should come out to Utah because it's the new Silicon Valley.
I've heard that. Yeah.
It's a lot nicer too.
If anyone wants to invite me to come do a talk or a workshop, I would love to.
We'll make sure this gets out to the right people. How's that?
Okay, great.
So I am sitting here and I am listening to you, but I am preparing my response, right? I am like thinking, okay, what am I going to say back? But the curious listener, what does the curious listener do?
The curious listener asks more questions, more follow-up questions. Like the curious listener doesn't prepare the response, but instead says, you just said such and such. I want to understand that more. Can you unpack that a little bit more? What did you mean when you used this word? And I want to make sure I fully understood you. Or they may say, I'm hearing you say this. Did I actually get that? Or did you mean something else? So when we're curious, we are constantly checking to make sure we're understanding and we're going deeper. Maybe we're exploring what they're not saying.
Oh, ooh.
Which is, that's kind of meta, but
no, I get it. I do. I get it because sometimes you have to encourage,
yeah,
to really like open up and be comfortable and not be afraid for that. It sounds like curious listeners, somebody who really asks open-ended questions that will lead to additional questions so you can learn really who that person is and what drives them, in addition to what they're trying to tell you about their ideas. And I think we can tell a lot about people from body language, from their smiles, from their facial expressions, and that helps you understand, okay, am I going too far? Do I need to push a little bit more? If you have open mindset and if you understand your people, right? Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Let's talk about speaking. You are a sought after speaker who often speaks at international conferences on these various topics. So how do you prepare for your speaking engagements? And what are some of the tips and tricks that you can share with maybe other aspiring speakers?
Yeah, I've been speaking for years. I actually was speaking back when I was in the tech industry, and I love speaking. And I've got an exciting conference coming up where I'm doing the opening keynote at the Global Innovation Forum in London next month. So that's exciting. How I prepare. So one of the things is that if I have slides, they come last. And I want to say that to everyone because people tend to go open PowerPoint or keynote and start with the slides. And that's the absolute wrong place to start preparing a talk. Okay. Start with who's your audience? What do they care about? What are the key messages you want to share? And what I do is I outline it. I actually am very old school in that I use Word and I outline it in topics and like, how do I break it down and what's the order? And I sometimes write it out. I don't always, but I sometimes actually write out the speech and I don't memorize it, but I practice it so that I get very fluent with it. And the last thing I do is build the visuals, and my slides are always very visual with not a lot of words on them, because if people are reading the screen, they are not listening to you. So whenever I see a presentation that has like so much text, everyone's just glazed over. They're not listening to the speaker. So I mostly use visuals. I mostly use images, maybe with a word or two. But the thing that most speakers, unless they're used to speaking and they do this for a living, that people forget is that you have your material, you have your slides, you have to rehearse. Yeah. You have to practice. And it doesn't mean memorize, because I think actually memorized talks, which you often see, are very dry and they seem unengaging. But you have to be very fluent with it. You have to know what's coming next, and you have to be comfortable with the material so that you're going to take people on a journey when you give your talk. You're going to take them through ups and downs and stories, and you're going to maybe have some interaction with them, and it's going to be engaging. And so practice that and get up behind your chair and get up and walk around. Like, how will you move if you're going to be on a stage? Or if you're going to be on Zoom, practice it talking into the camera, because it's, we have to get used to speaking into the camera instead of looking at, like I'm looking at you right now. Now I'm
hard this time.
It's hard. Right. I had to train myself to look at the camera. So anyway, what I just want to say is do not underestimate the rehearsal process. I think that's really important. It's something I learned from my acting training. Is like, you can't over rehearse, right?
Oh, okay. Now I'm tying back the drama now.
Right.
Circle here. I didn't even think about walking around, because you're going to be on stage, right? You're not going to stand behind a podium the whole time, right? You're going to need to walk around, shows that, so just while you're practicing, walking around, hand gestures. For me, so I'll record myself and then I'll listen to myself, and then I'll be like saying it out loud to myself. Like, that's how I work.
That's great. Yeah.
Because, the more you can do it's just like a test, right? You're practicing for a test or a speech or a play.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Speakers need to do that too. Great information there, people. Pay attention to that. Okay. So I ask everybody this question, and I've had so many different answers. It's been amazing. Who is the most innovative entrepreneur that influences you and why? It could be somebody from history, or it can be somebody currently. It could be, somebody you don't know or somebody you do know. So I'd love to hear your answer.
It's funny, I haven't really followed entrepreneurs, but I will tell you one person who jumps out at me when you ask me that question. It's not someone I know personally, although we went to the same school. Seth Godin. Seth Godin is so extraordinary because he's like constantly reinventing what he does. He's so generous. He's written like 20 plus books. And I feel like he just does things that he finds interesting and that he thinks the world would find interesting. He blogs every single day. He has his short little blog. And I just feel like what a generous entrepreneur, because he's clearly focusing on things that he finds compelling and important. And he just shares them with the world. And I think that's amazing. That's amazing.
That's a great answer. It's one nobody else has said. So
okay.
That's a great answer. I can tell you my husband will like you very much.
Oh, he's also, I will add one anecdote about Seth Godin. As I said, I don't know him, but I did reach out to him when Caroline and I wrote the Psychological Safety Playbook and asked if he would write an endorsement for it. And he wrote back right away and said, I don't promise you anything, but I will read it. And he read it and he loved it. And he wrote an extraordinary endorsement that's on the front of our book. So, shout out to Seth Godin. Here's the book. And if you see this little blurb, that's Seth Godin. He wrote, "Powerful ideas generously shared, simple, actionable, and urgent. This book is a must read for anyone who cares enough to lead." So that's Seth Godin. I admire him so, and he's so generous.
Oh my goodness. Well, right there is kindness. Again, right?
Yes.
Kindness and empathy. And I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to see what you have to say, right? I mean, it's seriously the example of what we've been talking about.
Yeah. So that's why I have so much admiration for him. And like, he didn't know me from anyone. So yeah.
But he respected enough to listen. It's just cool. I hear you. All right. So obviously everything's going to be in the show notes. Like I'm pointing down like people. So where can people find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, maybe just through my website, MinetteNorman.com, or on LinkedIn. Either way.
That is super easy. All right, Minette, you have been such a pleasure. And I guarantee you that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to take great actionable steps from this conversation. So I am blessed. I am grateful. I know I've learned a few things. So thank you for being kind and sharing this with me. And I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful day.
Thank you, Erica. I love talking to you.
All right. Thank you. Wow. What a great episode. I hope you had as much fun as I did. If you want more of this goodness, make sure you subscribe so that you get notifications for future podcasts. And if you found value from this, please share it with others. You can visit our website at cwgdigital.com. This is Erica Bailey. I am your host, and I will see you next time.